Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Tea with Z. My name is Zima Saleki, and it's an absolute pleasure to be joining each and every one of you this morning on another episode. And if you are watching live, or if you're even watching a replay, give me some likes, give me some hearts, because as you know, we love the energy exchange here, and that helps to let me know that you're loving this content as well, because I get so many people telling me in person that they're jumping on and watching. But at the end of the day, yeah, giving some likes, giving me some hearts really helps to foster that energy connection, but also encourage others to come on this journey with you as well. And for speaking of people on a journey, big shout out to those that are on the Limitless Network as well. Because as you know, the Limitless Network is a group of like-minded people that value health in any way, shape, or form. And that's a group for them there. So, jumping on today's episode and continuing on with our theme for the week. As you know, and if you haven't watched the previous episodes yet for this week, definitely jump on because it'll help layer on some context as to what we're talking about today. But essentially, we're talking about, and I'm not too sure if you've seen it, it's a show on Netflix in Australia, and it might be a show, it's a show definitely overseas, particularly in the US, because that's where this show is based and comes from. But I'm not too sure what streaming platforms or channels they might be overseas. But the show's called Suits. And for those of you that haven't heard of Suits, well, you might have heard of Meghan Markle, who was married to Prince Harry. She was on Suits previously before she got married to Prince Harry. But the show Suits is based around a New York high-tier legal law firm, and essentially is about, yeah, I guess this bunch of lawyers, partners, name partners, senior partners, associates, whoever it might be within this law firm, and obviously their work with their clients. But what it really shows and dramatizes a lot is about workplace culture and corporate culture, particularly, I guess, the little nuances that it sort of represents within our everyday cultures, but really blows it up and blows it out of proportion like any drama does. And as a result of that, when you look at the blown up version, you can take stock and note by peeling it back and paring it back and going, well, what are the little opportunities and nuances within the show, the messaging with the show that we can then tap into to really understand what they're really portraying and how it might be actually portrayed within our own cultures, within our organizations, our friends, our families, whatever it might look like, our communities, even whatever it might look like closest to us. And as a result of that, when you start to pair it back, at the end of the day, of any fundamental, and at the end of the day, a TV show is built off the fundamental principles and nuances within everyday life, because that's what creates its relatability. And that's why we engage so much with TV shows, is because there's at some fundamental level, a level of relatability. But when you look at the corporate culture portrayed in this show, one could argue that it is quite toxic. It is quite toxic. And one thing I want to touch on, kicking on from our chats early in the week, today is really touching on the way in which an organization is structured. And when we look at organizational foundations within a business, we look at the typical organizational chart. And our organizational chart within, our traditional organizational chart has your CEO at the top. You've got your COO, your CTO, your CFO, which is, your chief executive officer, then your chief operating officer, chief technology officer, chief financial officer. You might have your head of human resources, or, head of team or head of talent, whatever that might look like. And your chief marketing officer, whatever that might look like as well. And then, you kind of filter it down based on all of the roles and responsibilities within that organization. And one thing that really pops up within this show and the corporate culture within this is that despite having these roles and responsibilities that fit within an organizational hierarchical structure, within Suits itself, you've got named partners, you've got then other partners as well that appear to be silent partners, or you've got a board of directors as well. And then you've got senior partners, you've got junior partners, you've got associates, you've got secretaries, you've got paralegals, you've got all these other roles and responsibilities within these organizations. But one thing that really crops up within this show is the level of disconnect and disdain held between these different organizational hierarchies. And as a result of that, the team itself is not cohesive. The team itself is extremely dysfunctional. And if in the real world, and this is where, I guess the topic comes around is, well, do we idolize these cultures? Well, if this culture was actually brought into the real world and this organizational hierarchy and dysfunction within it was brought into the real world, I would very much argue the fact that, well, this actually would never work. This is so dysfunctional that that hierarchical structure or lack of hierarchical structure would simply allow their organization to implode. And as a result of that, well, what happens? What happens if an organization doesn't have clear structures? Well, there's no clear measures of accountability. There's no clear measures of reporting. And as a result of that, there's blame. There's deflection, there's justification, there's all these signs and symptoms of the ego that prop up. And we're going to deep dive into the ego more so exclusively in the Limitless Network tomorrow, and more on that later on. But if you are curious about that, the link is in the description below. But when you look at a dysfunctional organization, a lot of it comes down to the lack of clearly defined roles and responsibilities within an organization. And then leading on from that, the lack of clearly defined metrics to hold each role and responsibility to account, to ensure that doing what they say they'll do is actually being done, to ensure that our expectations of an organization are actually being fulfilled. And you can translate this as health entrepreneurs and people that value health, not only to others, but also to yourself and also to your customers, your patients, your consumers. Because at the end of the day, when you look at the roles and responsibilities of our customers, our consumers, our patients, there's some onus on them to undertake some work. For example, in the pharmacy world, if we educate them and guide them as to how to use their medication, well, the roles and responsibilities on them is to ensure that they are being compliant to that they are taking the medication as intended, as prescribed, that they are communicating things of concern back to the pharmacist, back to the prescriber, back to the healthcare team, that there are those open lines of communication back and forth, that they are able to voice any concerns or opinions, and we as health professionals can educate and empower that patient to make conscious decisions moving forward. But without the clearly identifying those roles and responsibilities and ensuring that there is those levels of accountability in that organizational hierarchy, well, then how can we effectively do that? How can we effectively do that within our organization if we ourselves don't know those roles and responsibilities and hold ourselves to account, but also have the level of I guess, and don't like to throw this word around lightly, but that level of respect and human decency, because to me, respect is earned. It's never just given. But at the end of the day, when you look at an organizational hierarchy and a traditional corporate organizational hierarchy, and I say traditional because obviously we're evolving, but that respect is somewhat dictated based on, their position within that hierarchy. But at the end of the day, what we're seeing more and more of right now is, and we've spoken about this, last week, is that that organizational hierarchy doesn't automatically, and no longer, and for a long period of time, doesn't automatically give you the respect that some people just come to expecting when they step into those roles. And that's what we're seeing now with the great resignation. The great resignation is really calling out those that are managers within their organization or sit higher up on a corporate hierarchy, but really haven't earned the respect or demonstrated the values of that organization or demonstrated the values of the, I guess, their team and their talent in a way that creates meaningful connection. And so, without really knowing our organizational hierarchy, well, where do we start? And so, that's my question for you today is, do you know your organizational structure? Is it clearly defined? And are the roles and responsibilities under that clearly defined as well? And if not, why? And if not, how is that showing up within your organization as to being not, I guess, being detrimental to the way in which you can lead and manage your team moving forward? Or your leadership structure can lead and manage your organization forward, or you within your family. Because let's be honest, within a family, there's a hierarchical structure. Within friends, there tends to be a hierarchical structure or some element of roles and responsibilities. You know, if you ask somebody to describe their role and responsibility within a friendship group, I'm sure others would describe, oh, he's the funny one. He does this, this, and this. Oh, he's the really organized one. He plans this, this, and this. Whatever that might look like. So, do you have an organizational structure and do you have clearly defined roles and responsibilities? And if not, what are the impacts of that? And what are the impacts that you're seeing in your life right now? And feel free, drop a comment in the comment section below because I'm really, really curious to see how this is showing up for you. And so that's it from me today. That's my question for today. How is this showing up? Is there this level of disconnect between the levels of hierarchy? And I really look forward to reading your comments in the comment section below. And if you want to chat in a really safe space, this is what the Limitless Network is all about. And like I mentioned before, there are some questions because I'm getting people joining on Facebook, but they're not answering the questions. And as a result of that, I can't really assess if you are like-minded or not. Because at the end of the day, it's a community of like-minded health entrepreneurs or people that just value health for themselves. And when I say health entrepreneurs, I even extend that to entrepreneurs. So those that are working for somebody else and they are entrepreneurial in their own right, but doing that under the guidance of somebody else's business. And so as a result of that, feel free, jump on. It takes 30 seconds to a minute to really answer those questions, but it helps to make sure that we're creating a community of like-minded people. So that's it from me today. Have an amazing day. And remember, we're exclusively deep diving into the topic of the ego tomorrow in the Limitless Network. And I really look forward to joining you there. All right, that's it from me.